But let's try and bring in our guests. We've got our panel of experts standing by, and we've also got lots of other reactions Mr. Kanabar, let me start by asking you, because at this point in time, the rate discussion continues. But on the back of what you heard from the Finance Minister, what is the sense that you get? Because as he pointed out, the approach to the rate discussion is that it should not further CPI inflation. It should not burden the taxpayer additionally.
As you hear the Finance Minister very clearly, he's trying to work towards a consensus, as you mentioned, Shereen, and he put those 5 alternative approaches which are being taken to ensure that the collections
Mr. Kanabar, I'm afraid, sir, I'm going to have to interrupt you for just a second. We've got the Kerala Finance Minister, Thomas Isaac. Let's just listen in.
4%. But that was not considered. Second issue that was discussed was what should be the rate of growth to be assumed for projecting the revenue. Well, after a lot of discussion, there was a choice between computing the 10-year trend growth rate.
So was there a discussion about how much tier structure will be there for the GST?
Well, GST structure, no decision has been made, but the official proposal has been presented to the Council, and we will be discussing it tomorrow.
So, but was there any discussion about how much rate will be there for the demerit goods, how much rate, or what was the presentation that was made to you?
Broadly, it was the proposal now is there would be a standard rate of 12 and 18, a higher rate of 26, and a lower rate of 6. And gold will be at 4%. That is the present proposal that we are considering.
What was the compensation plan that was discussed today? As you said, the entire day was spent on discussing the contours of the compensation. What was the main idea about it?
Yeah, the main contentious issue was how to calculate the revenue at the base year. What all should be exempted? Can the exemptions be now estimated into the base year? Well, it was not decided. So, in fact, actual revenue collected from the taxes that were being subsumed in the GST would alone be considered. That is a constitutional interpretation given. Second issue was the rate of growth of tax revenue in the next 5 years. So that was decided it would be at 14% uniformly for all states. This 14% will turn out to be the all states average of rate of growth for the last 5 years.
So what's on table for tomorrow?
Tomorrow we are going to discuss about broad GST tax structure.
So, one last question, sir. When you talk of gold at 4% to standard rates of 14 and 18%, how do you think that states will be able to conceive this idea? Is there a broad consensus on this idea, or there are still some issues which need to be ironed out?
Personally, Kerala government wants to have a higher upper rate, not 26%, maybe 30 plus. That would enable us to bring down the tax on necessities from the present 6% to a lower rate, 4%.
Thank you so much, sir.
It's a good program. I want.
Well, let's not react to that last comment that came in there from the Kerala Finance Minister suggesting that they would like a rate as high as 30%. But Mr. Kanabar, sorry I interrupted you. Now you have more information from the Kerala Finance Minister on what was the proposal that was presented. Your quick response.
So I think 2 quick things. What he mentioned is that in computing what should be the revenues that will accrue to the states for 17-18 compared to 16-17, a growth rate of 14% on a tax base has been assumed, which I think is a significant step forward, because then you know what is it that will be the deficit if the revenues which were budgeted are not collected. So that's a very important step. But otherwise, really, a lot will depend on what comes up tomorrow, because ultimately the key agenda before the council is to determine the rates. And then we heard the divergence of views out there, what the Kerala finance minister believes, and I'm sure the other finance ministers will have their own pushes and pulls.
That's right. Pratik, let me bring you in on the finance minister saying that 5 proposals were presented to the GST council today. So the discussion on the rate structure will continue. We just heard from the Kerala finance minister suggesting that the standard rate will be 12 and 18, a higher rate of 26 and gold at 4%. On the back of what you've heard so far, does it seem like we are getting closer to finalizing on that 18% number?
You know, the way I read this is that we are moving towards multiple rates. So we are moving away from 12 and 18, but we are moving towards 4 or 5 slabs, which is 6, 12, 18 and 26. We did not hear a 40% rate, which was being talked about in the Chief Economic Advisor report on aerated beverages and luxury cars, etc. So that could come down to 26. But I think I'm happy with that. I mean, I think 2-rate structure was not going to work in India to start with. So I think multiple rates is fine. 6% lower category is also a welcome move, because a lot of food products, you know, if you move the rate to 12%, it would have been highly inflationary. So I think that's good. The only risk that I see in this multiple rate structure is that if you're talking about 26% rate, you know, the temptation of the government could be to have many products under this 26%, and therefore 26% in that sense could become a revenue neutral rate, which we don't want, right? So I mean, we want that a clarity that which are the products which will fall under this 26%. I think that's very crucial for us to understand. The other point was that on additional revenue that central government is talking about, by way of cess, etc., is being discussed, and that's something which really industry doesn't want, and they don't want any cesses to apply under GST, because the understanding has been till now that all the cesses and surcharges will go away, and tax will be it will be a fairly simple structure.
You're absolutely right, Mr. Kanabar. I just want you to, comment on the point that Pratik was raising there, that we are moving towards a multiple rate structure, and we may not like it, but the likelihood and the possibility of 26%, the higher rate of 26% that we just heard there from the Kerala finance minister, perhaps becoming the revenue neutral rate.
Yeah, and I would agree with what Pratik is mentioning really, because if the gap between 18 and 26 is smaller enough, the attempt will be to push more and more items towards 26. We heard the Kerala finance minister say that he wants 26 to go up so that he could give a lower rate for essential goods. Now, 6% is as good a rate as one could get really. And if the attempt is to move even that down, then obviously it will put up pressure. So one of the two things has to happen. Either it is that 26 will go up to 30 or whatever else, and that list will be a small list, or 26 will be the rate, and that list will be fairly long enough. And that's a danger which one can see there.
Yes, absolutely. We are still waiting by now to hear from the other finance ministers at this point in time. But Pratik, because these negotiations and the discussions will continue tomorrow, and we broadly heard from the government what its driving philosophy or principle will be, what are the other key risks that you would be mindful of as these discussions proceed?
Yeah, so one is obviously the discussion on the rates itself, and we would want, as Dinesh just mentioned, 26% only on few commodities. The other is that one would hope that central government is not really talking about imposition of cess, because they have retained Article 270 of the Constitution, which empowers them to impose cesses, and industry is not very sure what will happen to various cesses like education cess and Swachh Bharat cess, etc. So one really hopes that we don't go in that direction. The other point on the cross empowerment, and I think that will also lead to a lot of debate between centre and state, because centre is saying that all the service tax assessees would be administered by central government till the time state builds up that capacity, and I don't think that states will readily agree to that, because along with the dual taxation, you also have a concept of dual assessment and dual administration. So I think that also will lead to a lot of lot of debate between centre and state, and I just do hope that there is a consensus on that which emerges, because that's really very, very crucial for timely implementation of GST to my mind.
Absolutely. But, just to take that point forward on if the higher rate is 26%, because as you pointed out, Mr. Kanabar, we didn't hear a 40% demerit rate from the Kerala Finance Minister, at least not yet. And that was the recommendation of the Subramaniam committee. And of course, luxury car makers, for instance, have been up in arms suggesting that why should that be the case? If it were to boil down to a higher rate of 26%, which then becomes perhaps the de facto demerit rate, this is in a sense going to be good news for corporate India, isn't it?
Yes and no, because it really depends on what goes in the 26% really. And if a huge number of items, Shereen, which otherwise were supposed to go at 18%, find themselves in the 26%, then are we really... So one of the things with the finance minister mentioned, and I would totally agree with him, is to ensure that the inflation is kept under check. But if we go towards almost a revenue neutral rate of 26%, and a lot of items are moved in that category, then that would not be achieved, and that I don't think is a very, very welcome step.
Yes, we are still, of course, awaiting clarity and details, and that's not going to happen anytime today. Perhaps at the end of tomorrow, we'll have more clarity on what makes it to which band. But yes, that is a genuine concern and a genuine fear that if more items that were meant to be in the 18% bracket were to move to the 26% bracket, then are we, in a sense, negating the very purpose of the GST? Pratik, of course, this is a matter that continues to be under consideration, but as far as the compensation issue is concerned, the finance minister very clearly is saying that that's now a done deal. But on the dual control, and this has been the niggling issue from day one when the negotiations with states have started, again, there doesn't seem to be a breakthrough yet on the issue of dual control.
Yes, and I think I think states have a point really, because if you're saying that all the service tax assessees should be under the control of central government, and there are 11 lakh assessees currently, all the states would feel that if the constitution has been amended to give them power to impose taxes, why are we taking away the right of administration? And I think there one will have to work on a definite timeline to say, okay, it will be 1 year for the central government and then it will be distributed between center and state. From industry point of view, of course, they will welcome one single authority for assessment and administration. But I'm not sure whether state governments are going to like that. So I think this will, along with the rate of tax, perhaps will be two most contentious issues that they need to resolve over the next 2 days.
Yes, that certainly is. And, we are getting more information from our colleagues who are continuing to track this story. Yes, Mr. Kanabar, go ahead.
The point really is that maybe here there is a dichotomy on what the corporate India wants and what the governments want. We are coming out from a situation where on account of multiple taxes, there was a fight as to whether something was goods or something was services. Now, if we have to avoid that dichotomy between center and state, as Pratik rightly mentioned, the corporates would normally want a central administration, whereas the duality of regime or control is what the states want. And that could lead to really an issue as to whether GST will put behind all the controversies that have been in the past, or are we continuing to get litigation on what should be classified where?
Okay, I want you to come in, Pratik and Mr. Kanabar, because as I said, our reporters hard at work and getting information. Our sources telling us that 50% of items of common usage will be exempt, no impact of CPI on them. Items like food will continue to be exempt or low rated, trying to move some items from the 9 to 15% band to 12%. Again, as I said, I'm throwing this information as it's coming into us for your comments. Pratik, let me start by asking you what you made of what I just said.
No, I mean, that's good. I mean, Prime Minister did make a statement in the Parliament that 50% of the food items or the medicines, etc., will be exempt. We don't know what will those items be, because food as a sector, it it's a very wide sector. I mean, it includes sort of fisheries, and it includes fresh vegetables and processed foods and cakes and pastries and cookies and all of those things, right? So what all would you want to have at a concessional rate is or exempt is something which we need to have a clarity on. And 31% of the weightage in the WPI index is given to the food product. So clearly, it's an item which lead to inflation, and one would like to see a lower rate on food products. I think coming back to the multiple rates, and why I was saying that multiple rate is a welcome step, is that you can't today, because the rates are varying significantly. I mean, for example, rice and oil attract a 5% effective rate because there's no excise duty on that. So 5% to 12% was very difficult, and therefore I think they're talking about a lower rate of 6%, which I think is very good for the industry.
Okay, gentlemen, let me bring in our colleague Sapna Das. She joins us as well. Sapna, you've been working the phones and talking to your sources. What should we now be given to understand, even though a final decision has not been taken on the rate structure just yet, but it looks like multiple rates, and it looks like we are going to see a higher rate of about 26%, and 12, 18 are likely to be the other bands.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, the centre is very comfortable with this discussion on the rate structure. Of course, as you have pointed out, no decision yet, but they are completely in sync on these kind of rate slabs. Having said that, 26% is what is being indicated even for probably aerated drinks and all that, and for example, even the other luxury items like a Merc or an Audi, things like that, those are the products where there'll be an additional cess that will be kept. But the indication is this, that even as of now, if you see what the rate, what the tax rate, what the excise rate...
Just one second, Sapna. So the CEA panel had recommended 40% as the demerit rate. You're saying that the higher rate is now likely to be 26% plus an additional cess on luxury items.
Plus an additional tax on luxury items, but also in terms of your luxury cars, they may well settle around the 40% level, because the indication is this, that beyond 26%, the rate can go as high as possible. That is what the conversation was. And even in terms of other luxury items, the indications are that, for example, white good items, some of them may be kept at 26%. For example, an air conditioner. Some other items, however, may be brought to 18%. So it's a division between 18% and 26%. For example, even aerated drinks. The indication was that why should we keep that at a standard rate of GST of 18% possibly? We can even keep that at 26%. Shoes, for example. So the example that was being given was that ordinary slippers, chappals as you may call them, they may be kept at 6%, not even 18, 6%. But expensive shoes can be kept at 18%. Okay. More luxurious shoes or luxurious items can be kept at 26%. Some others...
Got that. In fact, Sapna, Timsy, our colleague Timsy is also reporting that the cess that is being proposed or talked about will be imposed on tobacco and other demerit goods. The 40% slab is likely to be reduced to 26%, but that is not clear just yet. But Sapna was talking about that cess, and Timsy, our colleague, also corroborating. Let's just listen in to Captain Abhimanyu, the Finance Minister of Haryana.
Arun Jaitley ji is making sure that on every issue there is a consensus which emerges, and this is exactly what has happened today. After a long deliberation and discussions on the issue of the percentage of growth that has to be protected as far as state revenue is concerned, that we could finally arrive at a figure of 14% growth rate of the state revenues will be protected. So the whole environment is congenial, and the idea is to emerge with a consensus on every issue.
So there are talks going on that certain rate slabs were also discussed. For gold, a separate rate slab was being considered. So can you talk broadly on that?
I won't be able to comment on the specifics of whatever we have discussed, but broadly the various slabs have been discussed, right from the exempted goods to different level of goods like food, beverages and major commodities which are part of the CPI, and the high luxury items as well, demerit goods as well. The broad underlying guiding principle is that whatever tax rate that is effective today, by combining the state as well as center taxes, generally the GST rate structure should also be in the similar range, and that's so that there is no inflationary trend after the introduction of GST, and the inflation is kept in check, and particularly the CPI and WPI, keeping in mind the common man of the country.
So what about the demerit goods? As you said that when it comes to beverages, when it comes to other goods which are in the CPI, the inflation level should not increase. What was the tax rate which was suggested for these goods?
I said, as I said, I shouldn't be discussing the specifics, yes, but the highest range as the initial proposal that has been discussed is something around 26% plus some cess which could be levied keeping in mind the current tax rate structure, and also to create a compensation fund through this cess through which the states can be compensated in future. These are all discussions that are taking place, and I'm sure some decisions will be taken tomorrow.
So what about this cess? Can you talk a little bit more on this cess? What is this cess which has been proposed today, and how will it be part of the GST system?
See, it is only a discussion at this stage, because GST, we would like to keep the rates slabs as minimum as possible, to keep the whole GST regime as clean as possible, but keeping in mind the current rates structure on the high-end luxury items and demerit goods, we would also like to see that the current prices are not compromised and current revenues are not compromised. So this additionality of cess is one option which is discussed, which can also, as I said, act as a pool from which the compensation to the states will be given.
How much percentage of this cess was discussed? Like today we have a lot of cesses which are very minimal in ranges, like 0.5%, 1.5%. What was it, the percentage given for the cess?
Let me tell you, all these cesses are going to be subsumed.
Yeah.
There are no other complexities as far as cesses, surcharges are concerned, but this is only a rarity which is being discussed. We are not sure whether it will be decided or not, but it is a rarity which is being discussed, keeping in mind the peculiarity of the circumstances, as the states have to be compensated for the notional or possible revenue losses.
So CA was there, Arvind Subramaniam. He gave a presentation. In the earlier proposal, he had put demerits good at the highest rate of 40%. Was that also discussed, or is the 40% now reduced to 26%?
I won't go into the specifics of the figures, and yes, various options have been discussed.
How do you see tomorrow happening? What is on agenda for tomorrow, and how do you see states will react to the agenda tomorrow, which is discussions on the rates and finalizing them?
Center as well as all the states together are working in the interest of the nation as a whole, and also the common man of the country.
Was there any inflation incident which was decided that an inflationary pressure up to X level can be attained, and that can be absorbed by the government, or will it go up? How will inflation work out? What was the exact talk on inflation?
The consensus is that GST must not lead to any sort of inflation. Rather, we should be able to contain the CPI to the levels below the current levels.
Any level which was given?
The current levels.
Thank you so much, sir. All right, sir.
Well, that is the Finance Minister of Haryana. Our team hard at work there, not keen on giving out specifics of the rates that were discussed. But Mr. Kanabar, let me get both you and Pratik to comment on that cess, because now we have both the Kerala Finance Minister and the Haryana Finance Minister talking about the possibility of a cess being imposed on, as the Finance Minister from Haryana said, high-end luxury items, and that cess could be used to actually generate a compensation fund. What do you make of that?
So what we seem to be heading towards is that demerit rate, and within demerit rate maybe super luxury goods which will be subjected to a cess. So rather than have a higher rate, so instead of having a rate of 26 and 40 or whatever else, we are talking about a demerit rate and goods within the demerit list to be subjected to a cess. And of course one will have to wait and see where that cess will be used, what will be the rate, and what will be the mechanism. So rather than have multitude rates, we are, so to say, doing a little bit of a window dressing of having just fewer rates, but sort of again putting some items in on a cess.
Let me also bring in Hari from EY into this conversation. Hari, thanks very much for joining us. I don't know what you've heard so far on the program, but this is a lot of it is source-based information and a lot of it is coming in from the finance ministers that we've been speaking to exclusively. What we are given to understand, and this is of course from our sources, that the highest rate on services is likely to be 18%. There's also likely to be a lower service tax rate which may settle at about 6%. On the back of what you've heard so far, the possibility of a cess on high-end luxury items, the bands, the higher rate being suggested at this point of 26%. Your first thoughts?
Yeah, so as far as services rate is concerned, Shereen, what you just mentioned about majority being 18 and some services being at 6 is what it's been the rounds that's been taking place as far as discussions on services are concerned, because the question is whether they want to go through the rebate route or they want to have two dual rates for services. Now, as far as the 26% peak rate, I mean, let me just clarify. They had two options. If you look at the CA report, they spoke about luxury goods and some other items to be at the 40% rate. Now, that was the CA's view, that we should have a 40% rate and allow the GST chain to work. It now appears in the last, I would say, 3-4 days or a week, that the rate that they are attempting at a peak rate is something as 26%. And 26% is a peak rate. It's not the revenue neutral rate. Revenue neutral rate is something that you will compute, which will be equivalent to what revenue you collect today. So the peak rate is 26%. The question that is being debated is, do I go from 26 to 40, or do I apply 26 on some goods and apply a cess? In my view, cess by itself, by applying a cess, is probably not a great design to start with, because you're bringing in another factor inside the GST system. So to me, that is something which I personally would not encourage. But having said that, there seems to be a jury that is still not decided as to whether they will go with 26 and a cess, and in which case the cess may not be creditable, or they go with a higher rate than 26. So that's the debate that will happen. The second debate, which is very critical, which is emerging for the last 2-3 days, is
Harry, if I can just ask you to hold on, because we're getting more finance ministers speaking to us exclusively. Let's listen in to Abhishek Mishra, the finance minister from Uttar Pradesh, on what transpired at the GST Council today.
Should stay in which category? What were the 4 broad categories which were decided today, sir?
Well, the categorization in terms of goods was not decided. It was only discussed in terms of slab range. So there were slabs which were proposed right from 6% to 12%, 18% and 26%. Which categories will fall in which category? I think that is something which is still to be discussed.
So when we talk of today's agenda and the discussions that happened today, it took quite long. Were there some issues which were quite sticky, and that's why the states kept on discussing that issue for long?
There are always contentious issues. There always will be contentious issues. When you're discussing an issue which is as central to the, like fundamental autonomy and financial autonomy of a state or of a country, there would be sticky issues. But I think the states and the centre have come together in a cooperative federalism spirit, and thus whatever was discussed was in a healthy spirit. It was in a positive light, and I'm sure results will come out very soon.
So when we talk of the CA's presentation, was it based on the earlier formula and the discussion paper that he'd floated, or were there some changes, like 40% was the highest tax rate which was discussed by CA earlier?
No, I think that was not discussed today. In fact, CA did not make a presentation today.
So when we talk of tomorrow's agenda, is this that tomorrow the rates will be finally closed, or is there room for more?
Well, what tomorrow will bring, nobody can really say for sure. But yes, there will be more discussion on the tax slabs. There would be more discussion on the rates. There would be some numbers and data presented on sensitivity analysis, saying that if we do this, then what are the implications if we do this? Because you must understand that a fundamental question for us, at least for the states, and especially for a state like Uttar Pradesh, is that we do not want to create inflationary pressures because of the tax rates. We do not want to create a situation where my common man, uska roti dal kapda mehenga ho jaye. We don't want to do that. So that is something which will be guiding spirit, and then we'll take a decision in totality of this equation.
UP houses a lot of MSMEs, a lot of small traders, a lot of small manufacturers. How would you protect their rights?
Well, we would argue for a tax rate structures, exemptions, exceptions that are most amenable for them to do business, because they are the backbone of the economy. They contribute significantly to the employment of the people. They contribute significantly to the way business is done, business is preserved, the way the traditional handicrafts is preserved in the state, and then take it forward. So I think that is something very central to us. We will argue for their case, and I'm sure we'll succeed at that as well.
Have you also asked for some exemptions, like handicrafts? A very ailing sector, and it needs some exemptions.
It was not discussed today. We'll discuss tomorrow.
So what about the broad strategy when it comes to closing the rates tomorrow itself?
Well, there is no broad strategy. The idea is to discuss it till a level where you have a final conclusion which is conducive to the overall taxation rate structure that the country will have across states, across products categories, vertically and horizontally. And I'm sure it will come over with time. I'm not giving a due date, but maybe we come out with it tomorrow. Maybe we take another time.
There's also discussion on cess. How much percentage of cess was decided or is in works, that say 2% or 5%?
At the moment there is no, and it cannot be 2 or 5 or 6 or an X, Y and Z number. It will have to be connected with the category that we're talking about, the product that we're talking about. It cannot be something which is randomly applicable to everything. Nothing applies to everybody, right?
Like FM said, that cess will be applied only on the demerit goods, the highest level of the luxury goods.
I agree with that. It should only be, any excessive rate of taxation must be applied only on items that governments or societies want to regulate the consumption of, and to direct people in a certain direction, their behavior, and motivate them on a particular trajectory. And I agree with that philosophy.
Was there any projection on how much revenue loss will the states have from it, and how much is the compensation that states are likely to get?
No, why will there be a loss? At least I can assure you that in UP, in the Samajwadi government, and on record I can say that under Honorable Chief Minister Akhilesh Yadav, we will make sure we have put the infrastructure in place, we are putting the IT structure in place, we are training our employees, we are training our officers, we are investing a lot in our offices to make sure that we expand our tax base. We will increase our tax efficiency collection ratios. We will be revenue positive, if not revenue neutral, after GST. We will not be a candidate for compensation to the best of our mind and our effort.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Well, that is UP's representative at the GST Council, Abhishek Mishra, the Skills Development Minister. Gentlemen.